start off with this. How many of y'all, let's see if this is better than it was at 8:30. How many of y'all remember those Magic Eyes books, okay? Those flat images that came out 3D. Let's go ahead and throw the image up here on the screen. Does this refresh anybody's memories here? Okay, how many of y'all remember these? Just show your hand real quick, okay? So this was really popular about 30 years ago. It came out in the early 90s. So believe it or not, the early 90s were 30 years ago. How's that for a reminder today? Doesn't that feel good? It's like, no, that's like 5 years ago, right? That's like, no, 30 years ago. And it was just this thing to where it's just got like this flat image there. And if you look at it just right, you'll see that there's like this 3D type image that is there. And it was about 30 years ago that this was a really popular gift in my family at Christmas time. And so I remember that Christmas at Grandma Turner's house to where we had these Magic Eyes books that we just kept passing around. Probably the quietest Christmas that we ever had, you know, because it's just a bunch of people sitting there with these books and they're doing things like this and they're just like backing it out, they're turning it upside down, and it's really frustrating, isn't it? Because like some of these things are really hard to see. Can anybody see the 3D image in this one on the screen? It's probably tough from that distance, you know, but what's really, really hard is like, it's like you almost believe it's like there's nothing there, you know? It's like, no, that's just a series of just images, and it's just like there's nothing there. But then you've got that one person or those couple of people in your family, they're like, no, it's there. I can see it. Okay? And so the only thing that is more frustrating than the image is the people who can see it trying to tell you how to see the image. Because, you know, you're sitting there and you're like, I can't see it. There's nothing there. It's like, no. All you got to do, they'll start saying really helpful things like this. All you got to do is you got to look through it. Okay, if you'll look through the image, then you'll be able to see it. And I'm like, no. What you got to do is you got to get it really, really close to your face and then just slowly start backing away from it, and then it'll just pop, you know. Oh, no. What you got to do is you got to let your eyes get really blurry, you know, and if you let your eyes get blurry, then you'll be able to see it. You know, it's like, oh, no. What you got to do, if you cross your eyes, you know, and you stare at it cross-eyed, then it'll come, and you're just like, would you be quiet? There's no image there, you know. You're lying to me. You guys are full of it. You know, there's no way. But then you sit there and you stare. And you keep looking, and you keep looking, and you cross your eyes, you know, and you start looking through it. And then all of a sudden, what is it? What happens is it just pops. And you can see it, and you're like, oh, dolphins, amazing. There's a dolphin there. Oh, look, it's a unicorn. Or, you know, look, you know, it's a waterfall. And you're like, guys, there really is something here. And what did it take? What did it take for you to be able to see that? A shift in your perspective. A shift of the way that you're looking at it, just a simple little change and how you look, and you're able to finally see it was there the whole time. And today, as we wrap up our series based off of the life of Joseph, one of the things that struck me this week is really Joseph's story is a story of a change in perspective. It's learning to see through things. It's learning to look at things in a correct manner to where you're actually able to go, oh, look, that's where the Lord was the entire time. And as we end his story in Genesis chapter 50, we're just going to look at a few verses today. That's what I want us to see. I want us to have a change in our perspective. The same shift in perspective that Joseph had led him to be able to view everything that had taken place in his life as actually a gift from the Lord, not a punishment from the Lord. So Genesis chapter 50 is where we're going to be. If you remember Joseph's story, he's the one of 12 sons of Jacob, and he is his daddy's favorite. Daddy loves him so much, gives him a special coat. Brothers hate him, you know, and so they end up beating him, throwing him in a pit, and they're going to sell him into slavery. While he's in slavery, he's like such a good prisoner, or he's such a good servant that he ends up becoming, you know, the head of his master's household, and then his master's wife falsely accuses him of trying to take advantage of her, so he ends up in jail. Joseph makes the best of the situation, and he becomes the model prisoner. They give him the keys to the prison, okay? In there, he meets some folks. He interprets some dreams. He's left there finally 13 years from the time that his brothers sold him into slavery. He is now second in command in Egypt. He's in charge of their great big grain collection program because of the severe famine that's coming into their world. And then he's in charge of the distribution to all the people around the land, including his 11 brothers who show up and want some grain. And we talked about that one last week, but it ends up to where he finally reveals himself to his brothers. He's like, it's me, it's Joseph, the guy that you tried to kill. And they kind of have a happily ever after kind of moment there to where all the family comes together. Joseph forgives them, and they're living together in Egypt. Well, the time comes, because his dad was an old man, when Jacob finally passes away. And Jacob's death throws the brothers into a tizzy. We find it in chapter 50, verse 15. This is what the author tells us. It says, but now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers became, say this word with me, they became fearful. Okay, they're afraid. Daddy is gone. The one, probably the reason why Joseph has spared our lives up until this point is because of Daddy and his favor, and he doesn't want to upset Dad. And so now that Dad's gone, the brothers are scared, and they say, now's the time that Joseph will show his anger and pay us back. He's finally going to pay us back for all the wrong that we did to him. And so their guilt and their fear, and it just gets the best of them. And so they end up sending word to their brother, and they say, hey, we know Dad's dead, and you're probably mad at us. So how about this? Why don't we just become your slaves? We'll be your servants for the rest of our lives, for the rest of your life, and we'll just, that way everything is on the up and up. And so that's what they offer. And this offer, it kills Joseph. It cuts him to the bone, He's just like, oh my goodness, who do my brothers think that I am? And so he breaks down in tears. And if you jump down to verse 19 in chapter 50, it says that he replied, don't be afraid of me. Am I God? He's like, am I God? Am I the one? Am I God that I can punish you? And then listen to this. If you're a highlighter, underliner, star person in your Bible, oh my goodness, underline, highlight, star this, put a check mark next to this. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. You intended to destroy me. You intended to kill me, but God intended it all for good. And he brought me here. He said, brothers, I know that you think that you're the reason why I'm here. No. The reason I'm here is because of what the Lord has done. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. So don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children. Am I God? Am I God? So what's the question that Joseph is asking his brothers? It's this. So who has the right to give people what they deserve? Yeah, who is it? Who has the right? Who has the authority? Who has the power to give people what they deserve? And Joseph knows the answer. It's not you, and it's not me. It wasn't him. Who has the right? It's the Lord. It's the Lord alone. Only God has that right, because Joseph knows, hey, we're all sinners. We've all got flaws. We've all got things going on with ourselves. And so who is it that has the wisdom to give people what they deserve? Only God. Who has the right to give people what they deserve? It's only the Lord. And so he says, am I God that I can punish you? He's like, no. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. Now, if you're watching online or you're in the room and you've been a part of church for a while, there's a Bible verse that's probably very near and dear to your heart. It's over in the New Testament. It's Romans chapter 8, verse 28, where the Apostle Paul says these words, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. We know that God works out all things for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. And so for many of us, that is a verse that has gotten us through hard times, difficult times, pain, turmoil, because we're like, hey, I know that the Lord can use this for the good. Well, Genesis chapter 50, verse 20 is the Old Testament equivalent to Romans chapter 8, verse 28. But I would even go further and say this. I think Genesis chapter 50, verse 20 is even more powerful than Romans chapter 8, verse 28 for this reason. Romans chapter 8, verse 28 is a principle that Paul is sharing. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20 is the testimony, the personal testimony of Joseph. This is personal to him. You intended to harm me. You tried to take me off the face of this earth. You tried to destroy me, but God intended it all for good. That is his personal testimony. And so he says, I not only don't have the right or the knowledge to retaliate against you, I don't even have the need to retaliate against you. Why don't I have the need? Because I know that nothing bad that happens is not going to be overcome by God himself. It's going to be judged. It's going to be used. And so I hope as you listen to Joseph's words, you intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. I hope that you are hearing what he's saying. He's saying this: there is a purpose in my pain. There was a purpose for my pain. And Joseph was able to see that because he had a bigger perspective, that the pain was preparation for the plan. His pain was a preparation for the plan. And at some point in your life, listen to me, you will feel as though everything has spun out of your control. And you are going to feel like, I didn't ask for this. This pain, I don't deserve this pain. You're going to say things like, I never thought that my family, or I never thought that I would be a kind of person that is experiencing this situation. And this is God's promise. I am the creator of all things. But I am also big enough to know all the circumstances of every one of your lives. And I promise you, no matter what comes to you in this lifetime, no matter how difficult it may be, I will hold on to you. And I will hold you together. And it's whenever you know that truth, whenever you hold to that truth, whenever that truth has a hold of you, that's what allows us to say things like, what the devil intends for evil, God can use for good. That God didn't cause it, but he can use it. That whatever passes through his hands will be used for my good. That he never wastes a pain. That no matter what, he is with me and for me. In fact, I would say this: we may not get what we hope for, but the one we hope in never fails. I mean, come on. We don't always get what we want. But the one in whom we've placed our hope, he has never failed us yet. And he will never fail. And I know you're watching online or you're here in the room, you're like, preacher, I'm sure in your little preacher boy world, everything is great. And I'm sure that in your little corner there where you get to sit in your holy little office and sit there with the holy little book and you write your holy little sermons, that everything is just fine. But what I'm dealing with is like real pain right here, Like I've got real stuff, bad stuff, and you don't know how desperate I feel right here in this moment. And to just get up there and say this, you need to know I'm really hurting right now. And if that's you, listen, I hear you. And I feel you. And I feel for you. And if that's you, if I could say one thing, if that's you, lean in. If that's not you, you don't pay attention right now. But listen to this. Here's my question for you. What if that thing that you've dreaded the most is what God might use to develop you in a way that only he can? And what if, just humor me for just a second. What if the stronger the pain, what if that is an indication of the bigger the purpose that God has for you on the other side? What if it's the strong pain is actually revealing right now? It's an indicator that's saying God has a giant purpose for you just on the other side of that pain. What if? I mean, James, the little brother of Jesus, this is what he says. He says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And so let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Consider it pure joy. Isn't that weird? And it's like, dude, did you grab some funky mushrooms? I mean, what happened here? Consider it pure joy about trials and pain? That's just weird. It's like, hey, something bad happens, your first response would be, all right, yeah, I like that. I'm like, no. He's like, consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds. Why? Because there's a purpose. There's a purpose to your pain. There's a purpose to the trial. There's a purpose to the testing, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance. There's a reason, there's a purpose. He says, let perseverance finish its work so that you might be mature and complete, not lacking anything. I love how Pastor Craig Rochelle says it. He says this: sometimes God's preparation comes packaged as pain. I mean, that's good right there, right? Let's say that again. Sometimes God's preparation comes packaged as pain. And so if you find yourself in the midst of pain right now, what if the very thing that you are dreading right now is what God is going to use to develop you in a way that He and only He can? But how are we going to be able to do that? How do we get to a place to where Joseph, are we able to say, hey, look, y'all, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good? What do we need to do? Well, I think the first thing that we've got to do here is we got to learn to look for God's goodness. We're changing our perspective. We need to shift our perspective. This is all about the power of perspective. And so are you only focused on the bad that is happening in your life right now? Or are you flipping the script and you're saying, okay, I can see how good may come from this? One of my favorite Proverbs, kind of a life verse for me, is Proverbs chapter 11, verse 27, which just says this: if you search for good, you will find favor, but if you search for evil, it will find you. If you search for good, you'll find it, okay? But if you search for evil, it's going to find you. It is easy to find what you are looking for. Easy to find what you're looking for. Because listen, if you want to look around the world and if you want to see what's wrong, what's bad, what's not right, how things look like they're out of control, what's not working, I promise you, it is not that difficult to find that stuff. Turn on the news, turn on your social media feed for just a little bit, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, broken. Everything around us is broken. It's really not hard to do that. And if you want to, you can dedicate your entire life of just being the kind of person that's just like, well, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong, broken, not working. And you can choose to do that, okay? You are free to have that choice. And you are also free to live a very depressed and negative life if you choose to do that. Because if you just go around searching for evil, it's going to find you. You go out there searching for wrong, it will find you. But if you're willing to flip the script and if you're willing to go, I'm going to be the kind of person that's looking for good. I'm going to look for the good in things, and I want to see where God is working. And if you want to look around and if you want to see where God is working, I promise you this, it is not that hard to find where He is still on His throne. It is not that hard to see how He is still orchestrating events, how He is still moving the hearts of kings and leaders of this world, just like He directs all the streams that are on this earth. It's not that hard to find it. But the trick is, you just got to know where to look, right? And you got to know how to look. And we don't cross our eyes, and try to get blurry-eyed, but we just got to know how to look at things. Like I think back over my story, and I look back over my life, and I just think about the ways that God took things that I thought were the end of the world and actually ended up creating my world through it. Like I was in high school, and if you've been here before, you've heard my story, but whenever I was in high school, my main thing, and I know that as you look at me, you can tell this, is I wanted to get a basketball scholarship, okay? That's what I wanted, okay? And you look at me and you're like, makes sense, right? He's 5'10", he's a white guy, of course that's exactly the way this is going to play out. But in my head, that's what it was. I wanted a scholarship to go play college basketball. I'm more than anything. I was sold out, dedicated to it. And so my senior year of high school, though about 6 games into the year, I hurt my leg and I ended up missing like 4 to 6 weeks of the season. And so because of that injury and my lack of talent, I didn't get the scholarship, all right? And so at that time, I'd started attending First Christian Church there in Carthage, Missouri, and my youth minister was a guy by the name of Jeff Johnson. And Jeff had played basketball at Ozark Christian College right over there in Joplin, just 15 minutes away from my house. And Jeff, just was talking to me one day. He's like, hey, man, I know that you really wanted to play basketball in college. He's like, have you considered going over and playing at Ozark? He's like, because they're kind of like you. They're not that good. And, he's like, you'll be able to play a lot, And so it was just kind of like, well, if I want to play basketball in college, that's kind of what it's going to be. And so I start this path of going to Ozark Christian College, and then the Lord starts working some things out. And, then he starts calling me into ministry. But the big thing was I still lived in my hometown. I mean, the college was 15 minutes, 12 minutes if I drove fast enough away from my parents' house. And so I was still in Carthage, Missouri, still living there. And so one of those Friday nights, I went to one of the high school football games, because that's what all the cool kids who've graduated high school do, is they go back to high school football games. And I looked down there, and there was this cute little blonde cheerleader down there doing backflips and all these other kind of things. It's like, okay, that's Jennifer Curry. And so I went down and started talking to Jennifer Curry, and Jennifer Curry, spoiler alert, ends up becoming Jennifer Turner, all right? And so that's who I ended up marrying, and it's just like, I look back on all of that, and it's like, I thought that the leg injury was like the worst thing. What good in the world is going to come from this? Actually, quite a bit. And it wasn't basketball. It was ministry. It was family. It was me moving 800 miles away out here to Corinth Christian Church for the past 17 years. It's setting up, it's legacy. It's all these kind of things. And I look back at that, and it's like, you know what? Thank God that I hurt my leg. And thank God that happened. Because if you just change your perspective a little bit, you can sit there and you can see, okay, stick with me, what my leg intended for evil, God intended for good. The bad, the injury, and so it's just like, hey, he works out all things for the good. He causes everything to work for the good. He promises there's a purpose to your pain, that he's not going to waste your hurt. He's not going to waste your pain. He's going to use that. He's going to use that for the good. And so we are able to find meaning and purpose, and that's what galvanizes us in the midst of the difficulty. Is to be able to hold on and go, wait a second, let me take a step back here. God is going to use this for good. So God, please show me. Show me how you're going to use this for the good. But there's a second thing whenever it comes to our perspective. We're not just going to look for the good. Here's the second part of it. Is we're going to trust him when we can't see the good. We're going to trust him when we can't see it, because here's the deal. Here's what I've learned in life. Maybe you've learned this. Sometimes even if we're looking for it, sometimes it's hard to see it in the moment. Because you're like, it hurts too bad right now, or God, I don't know how you're going to do this, and I don't have a clue how this is all going to end up playing out right now. I feel like I'm lost. I feel like my prayers are hitting the ceiling. I feel like I'm alone. And it's like, wait a second. Even though I can't see the possible good, I'm going to trust that what is intended to harm me will be used for my good. I'm going to trust that his word is true and that he will work together for all good in this situation. And that just because I can't see it doesn't mean that he's not up to something. I'll be honest with you all. Personally, there have been a couple of things that I've been praying about for probably about 2 years now. And things that are near and dear to my heart, things that are weighing on me. And right now, for whatever reason, the Lord's answer has been, not now, not yet. And I don't know how things are going to go. I know it hurts. And I know that, it's real. I know that I'm not making it up. And I'm telling y'all, sometimes my prayers are just simply, how long, oh Lord? How long? What are you waiting on, God? Like seriously, you could have snapped your fingers. This could have been done, 2 years ago. You could have done this in a moment. You could have gotten this. You could have taken care of this problem. And you know what? I tell you, on my good days, honestly, on my good days, I can look ahead into the future. I can say, okay, here's where good may come from this. But on other days, it's just like, God, I can, even on bad days, I can kind of see what might good, but what pain is going to have to be endured in the in-between. And God, it really feels like you're kind of leaving us hanging here. And so a couple of weeks ago, We were at a conference down in Savannah at a Compassion Christian Church, and we were singing this song, and we sang it here last week. We sing it in here on a regular basis. It's that song, Waymaker, you know. And so that song, they just started playing into that song, and all these things had been in my heart, they've been in my soul, been wrestling through these things, and then it gets to that line, you know, even when I can't see it, you're working. Even when I can't feel it, you're working, because you never stop, you never stop. You never stop working. And I'm singing this song, y'all, and then all of a sudden it's just like, why is there hot liquid coming from my eyes right now? And it's like they're just starting to roll down my cheeks. And it's just like, God, I believe this. But I can't always see it. I don't always feel this. I don't always understand it. But I trust you, even though I can't see what's going on right now. There's a story over in Mark chapter 9. There's this dad that comes to Jesus with his son, and he's like, you know, hey, if you can, you know, will you heal my son? And Jesus says back to him, he's like, if I can? If I can? He's like, anything's possible for those who believe. And then this is what the dad says, okay? He says, I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief. And y'all, if that's not a prayer that you can take home today, in the midst of your difficulty, in the midst of your pain, in the midst of everything that you're experiencing right now, in this very moment, as you don't understand what's going on, you can't see what he's doing, you have no clue, you feel like you've been abandoned, you feel like you've been lost, you feel like you've been forsaken, you know all of that's not true, but your heart hasn't caught up with your head quite yet. That's your prayer. That's your prayer. I do believe. I do believe. Help me overcome the unbelief that is right now, because God, I'm struggling to see. I'm looking for it. I'm not looking for evil. I'm looking for good, but I just can't see it right now, God. How long, oh Lord? Help me overcome. Help me overcome my unbelief, because I do believe. You got to trust even when you can't see what the good is going to be. That's why it's called faith, my friends. If you had all the answers, it's not really faith anyway. Trust him, even when you can't see. So what are we going to do? We're going to look for the good in all things. And we're going to trust him even whenever we can't see the good in all things. So here's the bottom line, is that perspective turns pain into purpose. And that whenever we begin to shift and to be able to change and to see the way that we look at things, whenever we're able to get cross-eyed, blurry-eyed, or maybe back away from it for just a second, and then all of a sudden it's just like, bang, the picture starts to come into focus. That's what our perspective can do to your pain, can do for our pain. It will turn it into purpose. So here's my challenge to you this week is, why not just do this? Ask God for the eyes to perceive his purpose in the good and the bad. Ask him for the eyes to see it. Ask him for the change in perspective, to see his purpose in both the good and the bad. This morning, I hope as you were coming in, you received this prayer, a prayer for season of uncertainty. We handed this out. If you didn't grab one this morning, they're out and about in the concourse area. Be sure to grab one of these, because if you're like Adam, I want to ask God for that perception thing, but I don't know how to quite articulate the prayer of what am I really asking for. This prayer, Joshua was up here earlier. He came across this and he shared this with me this week, and was like, this is the prayer for us. That God, whenever we can't see you working, whenever we can't feel it, whenever we don't know, would you please help us? And so maybe you need to take this, and your specific challenge is, this is your prayer every day. And this is the prayer that you're going to pray. God, help me to trust you even when I can't see you. So as we wrap up the story of Joseph today, I hope that you've been able to make the connection between the story of Joseph and the story of Jesus. Because if you go back to that story, Joseph's story looks like bad news is going to win, but then you fast forward to the story of Jesus, and we're able to look back at Joseph and say, hey, bad news didn't win. But then you go back to the greatest story that was ever told. And along comes another dreamer. Along comes another guy for whom things just don't seem to go as planned. And this guy, they gave a robe as well. But this robe wasn't a multicolored robe, it was a scarlet robe. And this robe they gave to him after they had whipped him, they'd flogged him, they had beaten him. And it wasn't a symbol of his status, it was a symbol of the mockery that they were giving him. And his robe wasn't taken by his brothers, it was taken by those who intended to kill him. The crowds mocked him, his friends abandoned him, Peter denied him, Judas betrayed him, the soldiers crucified him, and his body was laid in a tomb. It wasn't just thrown into a cistern. It was laid into a tomb. Another dreamer, another disappointment. But on the third day, he rose from the dead and he woke up feeling pretty good. And on the third day, that's when bad news lost for all time. And if you want to know why I can stand up here and be so confident that God can work for the good in all things, it's because what we intended to harm him with, God intended for all of our good. His death, his burial, his resurrection for you. And so you can know this today. Whatever bad news you face has no power over you. And that your story can be a good news story because of the good news of Jesus Christ. And so today is a great day for you to say, I'm ready to step into that story. And maybe right now, as you look back over your life and you look at your life right now, you're like, it's a bad news story. Well, God is in the business of taking bad news and turning it into good news. But it begins whenever we step out in faith and we say, I'm going to surrender everything that I have to you. I'm laying it all down. I want you to take it all. Take my sins. Take the bad. Take everything away. I'm laying it all down before you. Jesus, would you cleanse me? Would you make me whole? Would you make me new? Would you forgive me of all that I have done against you? And would you give me the hope of not just eternity, but of a life that matters now? And so today, maybe you've never decided to put your faith in Jesus. Maybe you've never been united with him in baptism. If so, today's a great day to say, I'm ready to do that. If you're online, you can visit the website that's on the screen, and we'll be in touch with you this week. If you're in the room, you can grab one of those connection cards, and you can say, I'm ready to take my next step. Whatever that is, you want to put your faith in Jesus, if you're ready to be baptized, any of those kind of things, you can go ahead and say, I'm ready to take a next step today. And you can give that to one of the ushers as you're leaving this morning, or better yet, you can bring it up to me after service, and let's talk about what the Lord is doing in your life today. But today's a great day to begin the turn from a bad news story to a good news story in your life. So God, today we ask for your help to see that which we cannot see, to trust even in the midst of things not going the way that we think that they should. And we pray, God, that we would have the faith and the courage that Joseph has and the perspective that he had to be able to look back and say, what you intended to harm me, God intended for good. And as we look back over our lives, maybe right now today, maybe there's some stuff we've been holding on to that we've been carrying, and there's some bitterness, there's some resentment that is there because of the bad that was there. But today, just a flip in perspective needs to take place, and we can look back and go, oh my goodness, I missed it. See what the Lord has done? Look at that. That was meant to kill me. That was meant to harm me. But oh my goodness, God, you used that all for good. Thank you. Thank you. And so give us the perspective that we need. And God, for those of us who are in the midst of that season right now and we can't see the good that could come, or we struggle like the Father and we're just like, hey, we believe, God, we believe. Help us overcome our unbelief. Those moments when our fear gets the best of us. And in all of it, help us to trust that you know the way through the valley. And that you got something on the other side of it for us. And we pray this in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen.